Hello you lovely lot and welcome to a new video. My name is Katie and I thought for this one we'd kinda go beyond the box. And to be more specific, beyond the January ScrawlrBox. As you know, the January ScrawlrBox featured a concertina sketchbook. And we also had some coloured pencils in there as well as a pen. Now for me personally, I didn't feel like the coloured pencils worked how I wanted them to with this sketchbook, so I thought, well, I'd at least continue the concept but change the medium up a little bit, which is why it's a kinda beyond the box. The good news is though, I decided to use paint markers, which we did have quite a lot of them last year, so I guess it's a bit of a collaboration of all of the boxes, well, all of those boxes specifically. I'd sketched out my design and it was time to start colouring things in, and I started off with those Marabou You Only Need One paint markers, and let me tell you what a mistake that was. I really liked the colours we had with that particular box, but the paint markers themselves were really weird. In a sense, I actually feel like they were more for chalkboards rather than actual paper because, oh my goodness, they left so much residue. I did the background, it's that light blue on the page there, and it just kept transferring onto my hands, onto the other page, and I think that's why I suspect they were for chalkboards, because obviously you'll write your writing on there and maybe you want to change something and I think it would wash off, whereas a acrylic based paint marker wouldn't so much. It's just my theory anyway, so yes, I decided to scrap using those because it just was not working out. Another reason as well in general why I wanted to use paint markers is I've got so many of them. After years of Upcrate and ScrawlrBox and even Artful, they have accumulated quite a lot and I haven't bought any specifically for years. They're one of those mediums that can kind of last forever, and I'll go on to that in a bit. And as well, with there being quite similar colour schemes that we've had in these boxes, I guess I just haven't needed to use them up as much, because if I've got a teal blue in one brand, I've kind of got a teal blue in several others too. It's not a criticism, I do like a paint marker, but I felt like this would be a good way to use them up somewhat. To rectify that horrible chalkiness that the You Only Need One markers left behind, I went over it in a Marabou white paint marker, which I have had for well before I started this channel, and it just sort of made all of them horrible bits of residue stick down onto the paper, and it did resolve that problem and made it so it primed up nicely for another layer later down the line in this video. So now I've kind of got that out of the way with, let me explain the picture a little bit more. So I thought I would start it off as an angel, and that spreads over the 4 pages you see in front of you. And again, if you watched my previous video using this sketchbook, you'll know there's going to be a little surprise in there. I thought I'd stick to quite a light pastel-y colour scheme, but again, that marker background kind of kiboshed that a little, and the paper was getting to a stage where it couldn't cope with too many more layers, so I just filled that in black, and I thought, well, you know what, it's going to make those pastel colours stand out a little bit better. I also found and experienced during this work going on here that this paper is not massively compatible with paint markers. It's not so much that it chewed the paper up, the paper itself actually withstood it quite well, but it's a thirsty, soft paper and it kind of dries the paint before you've really let it settle down on the page there. It can leave it looking quite streaky, and you're probably more than likely going to have to go over some areas more than once, sometimes more than twice, but I really wouldn't push it any more than that. Another downside to using paint markers on this paper is, again, even though it is absorbent, it doesn't actually make the paint dry any quicker. It's still wet paint, it's just been soaked up by that paper somewhat, so you are going to have to really be patient in between those layers too. It also didn't help having some paint markers that were either dead or dying, and I kind of didn't realise it until I'd start filling an area in, which is why these angels' wings change colour. Oh well, never mind. If anything, I suppose this was a good way to sort out some of the markers that were doing fine and some of them that you could say have expired and succumbed to time. Now, I did use quite a few brands, as you can see. Obviously, Posca's are always a firm favourite. But we've also got the Amsterdam ones. We've also got some of Marabou ones, but they're not the you only need one ones. I'm never using those again. The Edding ones are also featured here, along with some loop markers, which I think they're kind of on the way out now. They're about 3 years old and I have used them a lot, but they do feature. And let's not forget the Daler-Rowney Simply ones. Now, I'll be really honest with you, I actually quite like the Daler-Rowney Simply acrylic paint markers. Not only are they incredibly cheap, I think I picked some up for £1 from, well, Poundland, and I do believe maybe 1 or 2 have been featured in subscription boxes. Now, granted, the nib on that is a little bit scratchy, but if you can overcome that, then I think they're a really good value marker. I think the colour payout is really good, the colour density is really good, and yeah, I'd highly recommend them. Obviously, some colours are going to be stronger than others. The metallics aren't particularly shiny as such, and maybe any white ones might not be as opaque as you'd want them to on the initial laydown, but sometimes that's nothing a few layers can't sort out. At this stage of the picture, I wanted to avoid using black outlines, so I picked out this purple Posca pen to do the job there. I actually don't really have very many purple pens. I obviously have lilacs because of the pastel ranges, but actually having a purple one, I think I have 3 in total. And yeah, you can tell. The Posca pen I'm using now I've had for quite some years, and I keep thinking it's going to run out and it doesn't. And well, put it this way, I suppose if I've got to replace any of the paint markers, it's going to be the purples. I liked how it was just deep enough to add some details in there, but obviously not too intrusive like using a black marker pen would have been. I couldn't tell for the life of me what size nib it is, but it's not one of the chunky nibs. I also have a fine liner one and one of those weird pointed nibs which are a little bit scratchy to work with, but they were fine to do all of the quills on the feathers there. It was quite a journey doing this whole piece in general, to be honest, because after blocking out the colour and having to make some changes to my decisions there, it was really looking ugly for quite a while. But as soon as I started adding these feather details down, it just sort of started feeling like everything was pulling together and starting to look and go in the direction I wanted it to. And to be honest, I really like that colour combination of those golden feathers and those purple lines over the top. I think this might have to be a colour scheme I visit a little bit more frequently. So we're at like a week or so on from having the ScrawlrBoxes, and that's assuming it's arrived on time for you guys. But what did you think of your concertina sketchbook? Was it the first time you'd used one before, or were you just glad to have another one? Did you treat it like a regular sketchbook and just used a page at a time? Or did you do an elongated picture? Or did you do something with something secret and hidden in between the pages? For the second entry in the sketchbook, I thought, well, let's hide a little devil on the angel's shoulder. So yes, that was what was hiding on those 2 pages there. I guess if anything, I'd just advise planning things out, make sure your lines match up and make sure what you put in between is relatively cohesive. Obviously for me, the anchor points on this whole drawing were the angel's wings, and all of a sudden those wings behind her ears now become a decoration, and she has big angel wings as well as. Now obviously I'd added some blocks of colour down there beforehand, and yes, it's already there, but I just didn't want to spoil the surprise up until this point. I didn't see the point in bringing out the devil until it was time to colour the devil in. Now you can see one of my markers dying right in front of us here. It is a Daler one, but I must admit I use them quite a lot. Luckily I did have a spare which probably had a similar amount of ink left in it, but it was just enough for this picture. The chances of me replacing them at the moment are quite slim though. Again, I just have such a build-up of paint markers. I don't feel like I need to replace any for the time being. But should I need this specific colour, it's pretty accessible and very affordable. For the devil's hair, I thought I would go for purple, and again, this is where we're going to witness another pen dying. To be honest, I'm surprised it's lasted as long as it has. I'd just say I was very lucky that there was just enough ink in there to survive, but aside from that, it has gone to pen heaven, and it will be joining a few others after this picture. But again, it didn't help perhaps using paint markers on this specific kind of picture, but hey ho, we learn, don't we? Although in my case, I probably won't. I thought lilac would be a good colour for the skin tone here. I just didn't really want to go down the complete route of making her red. She's got red wings, well, sort of pinkish red wing. And seeing as there was a bit of a wacky colour scheme going on, I thought this fitted in quite nicely. I'll be honest with you though, although the Poscas did do a job on here, I still stand by that the Daler-Rowney ones did a better job. Even though they'd got a scratchy nib, I don't feel like I was getting quite so many paint bogeys. I thought rather than using purple for the outline like I did for the angel, I thought having blue in there would just be a cool enough contrast for it to stand out, but remain within the same level of tone as the purple did, marking out the other line work I did there. It did take a little while of getting used to, and I must admit we're on another ugly stage of the drawing here, but once everything started filling in and I just started adding a few extra little details here and there, I was quite happy with how this devil was turning out too. So even though it's not been the best choice medium for the paper, I'm actually still glad I used the paint markers. I did need to sort them out. There's definitely a few in there that were dying, and it's just nice to make some space, not necessarily to fill it back up again, but just to enjoy having the space back. I've been sorting my studio room out at the moment, and that is still a work in progress. It's just such a nightmare going through everything, and I am a really messy person. So if anything, this has just helped me take stock of what I've got, and maybe I might actually start tackling my alcohol markers that I've got at the moment, because they seem to have spiralled a little bit out of control over the years too. Although personally I do feel like I am craving doing a bit of marker work, so I'd just keep tuned for that. I'm not making any promises for the immediate future, but yeah, I think it might be time to play with them again, and some more coloured pencils too. But similar to the paint marker situation, there's been a lot that have been given to us in subscription boxes over the years, and as well I have picked up some where I've thought, oh, they look a bargain, you know, they've been maybe £2 or £3, and I've picked them up, and I probably should start to use them a little bit more frequently, because eventually, it doesn't matter how well you store them, they do dry out, and some of them are not refillable, so yeah, I should use them up. Anyway, that's enough waffling about me just not being very capable at being tidy. Let's talk about what's going on here. So I thought I would give her green eyes, because I just kind of like how they stood out. It's not a hugely deep green, it's pretty pastel as well, so that's still pretty much in keeping. And obviously I thought the blue lips would look quite good, and once I'd added those details on there, again, that ugly phase was just disappearing before my eyes, and I was really happy with how it turned out. I'd got 1 or 2 random paint markers which I'd picked up again years and years ago from Lidl, and I just thought the white metallic pen would be great for adding just a few little highlights on those feathers to break it up a bit, and the Spectrum Noir Silver in the very fine nib would just be great for adding, I guess, a bit of an eye-catching outline to things. You can see on screen now that I'm obviously using 1 or 2 metallic Posca pens, and to be honest, they just don't quite stand up to the solvent-based markers there, but again, it just adds a little bit of texture and a little bit of movement as your eye runs across the page there. Because there were so many layers of acrylic ink down from the markers, going over it in the solvent-based pen was not a problem at all. However, I do think if you'd use them straight on the page, I think you would have a sort of horrible greasy halo around them, around where the ink lay, I don't think it would work out so good. So again, perhaps bear that in mind. Anyway, we are pretty much complete in this little angelic and demonic journey here. I just want to show you how I quite like this hiding and folding mechanism of these sketchbooks, and I definitely recommend you have a play about and an experiment with it to see what you can do with it. It's almost like it is animating itself on the screen in front of you. Okay, that's probably a stretch too far, but yeah, it's great fun trying to conceal hidden pictures within these concertina pages, and I definitely recommend you give it a try. Like I mentioned on the ScrawlrBox video, it's a great exercise in composition. Anyway, you lovely lot, I want to say a massive thank you for watching. I do hope you've enjoyed this second instalment of the ScrawlrBox, and I'll see you lovely lot soon. Bye!